Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be another fashion inspired cake. I loved the airy fluffiness of this dress and the architectural design on that headpiece. Now I did have to turn those around so that the pointed pieces were towards the cake, and that's just because they didn't want to hold up the other way. But I still really liked the end result, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So let's get right to it. First, we're going to make our edible crinoline. Now, I've done this a ton of times in the past. Well, a ton is a lot, but quite a few times in the past. So the overall gist of it is that I'm using wafer paper, water, a little bit of glycerin, and some food coloring to make an edible crinoline or lace effect. When I saw that picture of that dress, that's exactly where my mind went. So I used fondant for the top to create the pleats, and I'm using the crinoline in a wrap method around the bottom of the bottom tier. So there, I just dissolved, the recipe will be in the video description here, but I dissolved wafer paper into the water, chopped it up in my little Ninja processor there, and added a little bit of glycerin and a tiny bit of pink and ivory food coloring. Now you just mix that all up into a slurry, and then you kind of basically fry it on your pan. And this is what you end up with. Got to make sure you spread that in a very thin layer on your pan to get this kind of a lacy effect. But I made a ton of these. I think I did three double recipes to get as much as I needed for this entire dress. So once I have all these, I'm going to stick these into a plastic bag, a plastic Ziploc bag, to keep them nice and pliable until I'm ready for it. And the glycerin is my final touch to keep them nice and flexible. So here's a little bag. I put them in there. You can kind of see the very pale pink that's in it. The original inspiration picture, I'm not even sure if it was pink, but I wanted to make it pink. So we did that, very pale. Now I'm adding color to my wafer paper that I'm going to cut into strips to do that little headpiece design on the side. Now I just used some Color Mill Black. This is oil-based food coloring. You can use gel-based too, or gel food coloring, that's fine. But since this is oil-based food coloring for candy, it mixes very well with the vegetable oil that I use to create kind of a paint. And I'm just using a makeup sponge to apply it onto the wafer paper on both sides. Now I did all of them. I did a few, but I'm just showing you one, and that I kind of, after I got through all of them, I stacked them up, layered them in paper towels to let the paper towels kind of absorb some of that oil. And then I went back and I wiped off the excess oil before I cut these strips. And there's going to be a little bit of oil in them, but they still work just fine. And I find you get a better, deeper color when you do it this way. So I just used the paper cutter to cut them into about 1/4 inch strips, and then I used the extra. I decided last minute to do some a little floral accent. So I'm just used my rose petal cutters, just kind of indented the impression into that wafer paper so that I can see where to cut, and I just cut out those petals. I did 3 layers, 3 different sizes. And I just set those aside for a minute while I'm assembling my, what are we going to call these? There's a name for this. I have done it on other cakes. Oh, it's just gone. If you guys can think of the name of it, you let me know. And I've done it. It's just, I'm drawing a blank. So I'm just attaching these together in these loops with some edible or some wafer paper glue. And it's just wafer paper melted down with some water into a thicker paste. You can just pop it in your microwave for about 10 seconds, and you get a nice paste out of it. Just use your scraps to do that. And then I'm just pinching them together where I want them gathered. I'm just kind of doing filigree. That's the word. This is your filigree technique. Sorry, just that probably was loud. I'm filigreeing them. Then I set those aside, and I'm just adding a little bit of movement into those petals. You don't really have to worry about them ripping so much since they have that oil inside the paper. It's going to give it a little bit more flexibility, just to give them a little bit of movement. And then I just made some centers with a flower mold that I have, silicone fondant mold that I have. And I just attached that in the middle with just a little bit of some piping gel. Now I'm making my wrap. This is the double thick wafer paper, and I just measured the length and the height, and I just glued 2 pieces together that will go around the entire cake. See, I'm checking there to make sure that it's right. Then I added a little bit of glue or water. No, that's the wafer paper glue, just to attach the pieces together, so that your lace dress pieces are going to be sticking to that and not your buttercream, which makes it nice because when it comes to serving it, you can just cut that piece off and then you're just stuck with fresh buttercream. And I cut those pieces in half, so I have half circles. Some of them I'm kind of gathering together, and some of them I cut in quarters, so that some are gathered and some are not, to give some variation in shape there. I wanted it to be airy and flowy and light, and I think this technique really did give that effect. This did use quite a bit of these wafer paper, the crinoline pieces that I had fried. So the frying part of it is honestly what took the longest. Applying it did not take that long, maybe about 45 minutes to actually apply it onto the cake, where it took me a couple of hours to actually fry them up. You just have to have patience and let your pan do what it's supposed to do. So I'm going all the way up to the top edge there, and here isn't that pretty? It's just so delicate and pretty. So I set that to the side because I'm going to add a little bit more to that once I have it stacked. But you'll see that in a minute. Here I'm just rolling out my fondant to do my pleating on the top. Now I buy my black fondant already pre-colored. I definitely suggest that because the dark colors, the blacks, the reds, the purples, the deep blues, those darker, deeper colors, if you add that much food coloring into your fondant, whether it be store-bought or homemade, it's going to affect the consistency of your fondant. Now, if you do the Liz Merrick fondant recipe and you do it the way she does it, where you add part of the store-bought food coloring that you add to your marshmallows, you add that already colored deep color fondant, so it really kind of eliminates having to add extra. So just a little helpful hint there. And I just lined those up. I just attached them to each other with some shortening. You can use water if you prefer. Shortening, I just find I can move it around a little easier if I misplace a piece. And I just put it on that piece of acetate that I have there with a little shortening. I place the fondant wrap on it upside down so I can lift it onto the cake more easily. Hopefully watching it has more explanatory than it helps explain it more than me trying to verbalize it. That's something you really need to learn by watching instead of me telling it. And here I'm just making a pleated piece to go around the bottom to connect the 2 pieces. I probably didn't need that. That's up to you. I think it looked fine the way it was, but for some reason I thought I needed to have another piece in the middle. I don't know, maybe I kind of liked it better without it. You can do either way, but I cut away some of the excess thickness of the fondant where the pleated piece was going to be so that it's not so wide on the bottom of that top tier, because you don't want it to be like tapered too much, thinner at the top and wider at the bottom. And it is a little bit, because you do have layered up pieces of fondant in that wrap, but I don't think it was too distracting. And here I'm adding those extra pieces of the edible lace or crinoline, whatever you want to call it, more in between the 2 tiers to kind of marry those together a little bit more. And then I'm kind of filling in with my extra pieces. I didn't want to waste any, so I thought I'd just go through and see if there's any places that were a little bare that could have used a little bit more filling in, and I just kind of used up most of my pieces. Now here I'm attaching our little filigree decorations. I'm just using pieces of floral wire cut and bent into a U shape to attach those to the cake. And just remember, as always, communicate with your clients so they know that there is wire in there that needs to be used or removed before serving. So here's our final product. I think it's really pretty. I just can't stop being inspired by these pieces of fashion that I keep coming across. I hope you guys don't get tired of them. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. And we'll catch you on the next one.